as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, that the work of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming, and no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spat on the ground and made mud with his saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, then how were your eyes open? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go up to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes and I washed and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes? He said, he is a prophet. The Jews did not believe that he had been born blind and had received his sight, until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight, and asked him, is this your son, who you say was born blind? Then how then does he now see? His parents answered, we know that it is our son, and that he was born blind. But how he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age, he will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews. So the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So for the second time they called the man who had been born blind and said to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered, whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that I was blind, now I see. They said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? They reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. As for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a blind man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and you would teach us? And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out. And having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. He said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. Jesus said, for judgment I came into the world, that those who do not see may see, and those who may see become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, are we also blind? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains. All right. Now, I want to refer one thing. It says, as he passed by, in the very first part of the verse. And I'm not sure, there's two ways of thinking about this as he passed by. One would be to say that this happened right after chapter 8. That could be one way you could look at this. But another way that I would look at it is John is saying this is continuing the thought of chapter 8. This is continuing that thought. We see the Pharisees, they think they know things that they don't truly know. Now we're going to see it illustrated in a whole nother way. So then we get into chapter 9. It's a pretty obvious theme in chapter 9. What is the theme of chapter 9? Jesus healed the man born blind. Now the theme would be blindness, right? The theme would be blindness. Now, the book, the chapter opens in an odd way. They meet this man blind, and he's blind, and the disciples ask Jesus a question. Why was he born blind? And that's the first question we really had to ask. Why was he born blind? Why was he born blind? It's to you guys. Why was he born blind? Go ahead, brother.
Jesus said that the works of God will be manifest in him.
Okay, so that God's work will be done. What did the disciples assume about him who had been born blind? That he had been in sin. Now here's a weird thing. He had been in sin and he had been born blind. Right? So they asked the question, was it this man or his parents that sinned? It was no question that somebody had sinned. But Jesus was like, nobody sinned in particular that caused this. Right? He was saying, yeah, they had the same sin that everybody else had, but they didn't do anything particularly different to earn this. This is just the purpose of God. And it kind of reminds me of a passage in Luke where it's talking about, hey man, what about all those people who fell when that tower fell? And he said, you think they're worse sinners than anybody else? But I tell you, if you don't listen to me, you will likewise perish. He was born blind. Now, let's just think about something. I hope maybe you're thinking about the whole chapter here. But who else thought the same thing that the disciples came into the chapter thinking? The Pharisees thought that too. How do we know that the Pharisees thought that? What did they say? They say you were born in utter sin. And we can assume that if the disciples thought that and the Pharisees thought that, let's just be real, everybody thought that. Everybody thought that this man's suffering was due to his sin. Was the man a sinner? He certainly was, but he wasn't any special kind of sinner. He wasn't like he was a drug dealer. Because he had been born blind. And his parents seemed to be particularly religious. They cared a lot about being part of that synagogue. So much so that they threw their own son under the bus. So everybody in this story is religious, and everybody in this story is wrong, except for Jesus. Now, at the start of the story, the man is blind. At the end of the story, who's blind?
The Pharisees.
The Pharisees.
The Pharisees are blind. Now, let's think about some things particular about this healing. How was the man healed? Jake, go ahead. He did what? He spit and made mud. So how, let's just say this, he disgraced the man. Didn't he? What if I spit on you? Is that a sign of respect or a sign of disrespect?
Disrespect.
All right, some people try to interpret this differently, and the truth of the matter is spitting is always a spitting, no matter how you interpret it. So, let's think of it in another way. Could the spitting have been an analogy for the man's life? Let's just think about it this way. The man was born blind, but he didn't particularly do anything wrong. Through Jesus' work in his life, that man received his sight, and later on, he came to know the Lord. So if you heard that man tell it, him being born blind, which for other people would be considered to be a disgrace, was his greatest blessing. Well, this man comes and sees Jesus, and Jesus spits on the ground, mixes it with some dirt, puts it on that man's eyes. And everybody else around will be disgusted by that. But for this man, that act that others might consider to be a humiliation
saw as healing his greatest need. He then goes forward seeing. Now, Jesus is very funny in this passage if you look at it another way too. What does he say to the man? First off, he heard the man got cast out, he found him. And the man said, "Who is the Son of Man?" What the first thing Jesus said? "You have seen him." He said, "You have seen him." He said to a formerly blind man. If you don't got a sense of humor about that, I'm telling you, that's funny. You have seen him.
He's only seen so many people.
It's humorous. Jesus is very funny, but you have to get it, what he's saying. Go ahead.
Also, let's look at the fact that it was a Sabbath. And so the man had to actually go and wash in order to get the blood off of his eyes. And so he got the attention of the Pharisees, but this man don't understand.
Yeah.
So it really got, he kind of did it in a way that it would get the attention of the Pharisees.
Well, let's think of it this way. The man didn't do anything wrong. Even if you look at the law, even if you look at the Pharisees, they didn't accuse a man of doing anything wrong. Because when you got healed, what did you have to do? You had to present yourself before the law, the priest and the scribes, right? So, but you are right, that did get their attention because it was done on the Sabbath. And that was going to be the next point. He did this on the Sabbath. Why he do it on the Sabbath?
To make a point.
Hey, I'm going to tell you something about Christianity. We should aim not to offend people. But that's what Jesus did. Amen. Dismissed. Is that what happened in this chapter? Jesus is poking his finger at people's eyes, right? Literally and figuratively in this chapter. He done put dirt in a man's eyes and healed him. But in that, he also put dirt in the Pharisees' eyes. He healing them, right? There is so much symmetry in this passage. If you miss it, I'm telling you, you need to read it like 3 times sometimes to really get what he's doing. There's jokes in this passage. The passage in its own way is funny and sad. It's one of the funniest, you're right, it's one of the funniest passages in the New Testament. And it's a lot of things that's said in a way that's almost tongue-in-cheek, right? He's saying, that's the man. No, that ain't him, right? That passage, that's going to be funny, right? No, that's him. No, that ain't him. No, it's me. They say he kept saying, it's me. They wasn't listening to him. They was not listening. No, it's me, guys. No, that ain't him. People didn't care about him. And why didn't they care what he said? Because he was blind. Just a beggar. Yeah. That ain't him. It is me. That ain't him. That's because you whispered to me. Okay, I was born blind, not deaf. Okay? All right, so there's just funny things going on, and they bring, and it's like the Pharisees won't listen to him. Do you notice that nobody listens to this man? The crowd don't listen to this man. His parents don't seem to listen to the man. The Pharisees don't listen to the man. Well, who listened to the man? Jesus listened to him. And it's just funny because everybody in the passage is wrong. Even they asked the blind man, who do you think Jesus is? What do you say?
A prophet?
He's a prophet. Is thinking that Jesus is a prophet going to get you to heaven?
No.
Nope. It also tells us something about salvation. Just because God does something good to you, unless God reveals to you who he is, you will not believe in him. Even if he heals your eyes. He has to tell you what you're seeing. So he comes to the man and says, hey, you see. Here I am. Then the man worships. But the Pharisees, who think they see, who would refuse to be humiliated enough to have dirt rubbed in their eyes, they'll never be healed. And that's really the point, isn't it? Because oftentimes for us, we have to be humble to hear Jesus. Let me say it another way. You have to be humiliated or embarrassed to believe in Jesus. That's just the way it is. You have to be willing to be embarrassed. You got to be willing to look bad. You got to be willing to lay down your dirt and confess it before all if you want to be saved. You got to be willing to be cast low so that God might lift you up. But you got to have faith that he's going to lift you up. before you throw yourself down. You're not fake throwing yourself down like, ooh, you gotta go catch me. No. He said, I don't care if you do catch me, I gotta throw myself down first. And then God will raise you up. It's interesting because these chapters have a flow to them. Chapter 7 led to this. Because chapter 7, Jesus was revealing who he is, but people didn't believe. Chapter 8, they are convinced that they are Abraham's children, but they don't believe. They're the children of Satan. Chapter 9, they think they're Moses' children, but they're not. Then we're going to get into chapter 10, where Jesus starts to be explicit with them. Because I believe chapter 10 just continues the same charge. Chapter 9, he will start to say, I'm the good shepherd.